Now, as we look forward to the next round of the playoffs, an exciting round in the Western Conference, we have the Nuggets against the Clippers in that 2-3 seed matchup. Geoff, who you got? How many games?
I got the Clippers in 5. They weren't great against Mavericks, but the Mavericks are an amazing team, especially with Luka Doncic, who averaged almost 30 points a game. But the Nuggets did beat the Jazz in the series, but those first 3 games they really weren't that good, and the Clippers team can really take advantage of that. And Paul George, last 2 games, he's been back to Paul George, not pandemic fee. He's been playing good. He's been putting up 28 points, good numbers, and because of that, I think the Clippers will be able to beat the Nuggets in 5.
Okay, that's some solid reasoning. I'll go next just because I kind of want to go off of that. I have Clippers in 6. Nuggets. So they started to learn how to play defense towards the end of that series, but they looked horrible in the beginning games. They kind of just, I guess they had a turn of intensity with that momentum, and they might carry some of that into the Clippers series. So I think they can pick off a game or two with Jokic and Murray. And also, Michael Porter Jr. has looked horrible, in my opinion. I think he needs to produce a little bit more. But as far as the Nuggets team all around, they're playing with the right intensity. So I think they can steal a couple games against the Clippers, just like we saw the Mavs do. Gabe, you're next.
Yeah, I agree with all of your points. I just have the difference of how many games it'll be. I think it'll be Clippers in 7. When the Clippers weren't playing well at first against the Mavs, and the Nuggets in that first game looked really good against the Jazz, winning despite Mitchell's 57. I wanted to hop on the Nuggets bandwagon and say they could beat the Clippers, and part of me still really does want to say that, but the Clippers are they're just too star powered. They've still got that depth off the bench. Harrell and Lou Will can still carry it when Paul George and Kawhi aren't on the field. And Paul George has been looking better. He's no longer looking like a pandemic P. So, yeah, I think that the Nuggets can win the first game, maybe even the second game, and then one game after that at some point. But I just think the Clippers are the better team, and it'll show. So they'll win in 7. It'll be close, but they'll win.
Yeah, I mean 7 games is. I think that's a pretty bold prediction, considering that the Clippers are such heavily favorites.
It's just
Kevin,
that momentum.
yeah, Kevin, how many games you got if you're taking Clippers, which I assume?
I don't do this often, but I agree with Geoffrey A here. I'm going to go with the Clippers in 5. Look, the Nuggets are giving up over 120 points per 100 possessions. You know what the perfect cure to Paul George's playoff struggles is? A terrible defense, and that's what the Nuggets are. You touched on it perfectly. Michael Porter Jr. is absolutely horrid on defense. That's why he can't be in those late minute situations where he might be a plus on the offensive side. And also, the Nuggets are emotionally drained after this after the 7-game series. The Clippers had 4-day rest, and also the Clippers had their first playoff series win together as a team, in this new constructed team. So that's a huge step that they need in that experience to really have a championship run to challenge the Lakers. So I don't think it's really going to be a challenge here for the Clippers.
Yeah, strong argument there. Nuggets role players are going to be the key if they want to pull out some games. But let's move on to Lakers versus Rockets. Does anyone have the Rockets, first of all? Okay, silence there. So let's just see how many games you got the Lakers winning in. Geoff, you go first.
I love the Rockets. They've been one of my favorite teams to watch during the season. They've been amazing, and the Rockets small ball lineup was extremely effective against the Lakers when they played during the regular season. But with that being said, I had the Lakers winning in 7, and I think it's going to be extremely close because the only reason I have the Lakers winning is because Russell Westbrook, after coming back from the injury, hasn't been playing great whatsoever, and I think that AD is going to have a monster game against this Rockets small ball lineup. And especially after what the Lakers have done after the first loss with Trailblazers, they've really come together as a team. LeBron James has been amazing, averaging almost 30 points a game. And I really think that the Lakers will win, but in a very close series.
Yeah, so what makes you think the 7 games then? What do you see from the Rockets? I mean, just from recent, they had a pretty tough time putting away the Thunder.
I think the Thunder are a really good team, first of all. I don't think they're as bad as people say they are. And not only that, the small ball lineup, last time we saw them, extremely effective against the Clippers. And if Russell Westbrook, if he keeps passing the ball, if he keeps rebounding and not shooting threes, then this Rockets team will have a great chance against the Lakers.
Okay, Lakers in 7. Gabe, how many games you got?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that you said 7 games. The Rockets are probably my favorite winning team right now. But I still think that I'm gonna say Lakers in 6, but I say barely in 6. I was thinking 5. So that's why I'm kind of surprised because I think defensively, who's gonna guard AD? PJ Tucker can. Daniel House, PJ Tucker really bang down there with AD. Can anyone really stop LeBron when he drives to the basket? They've got some good perimeter defenders, but I just think that LeBron's strength and AD's size, and once they blow past them, no one can stop them. And then if their shooters get going, even just a little better than they have so far, then I really think that the Lakers are unstoppable. But James Harden will be scoring a lot better than he did this past game. And Westbrook will be able to get to the rim past Danny Green, KCP, because those are like his primary defenders. So I give them 2 games, but I say barely 2 games. But I am going to say Lakers in 6.
Yeah, that's a good argument. One thing to note is Steven Adams was basically a non-factor in this series between the Rockets and the Thunder. AD is not Steven Adams. AD is going to assert himself much more in the paint like we saw in that Blazers series. So that's something to consider when you're trying to figure out how many games. Kevin.
Yeah, I also was leaning towards Lakers in 5 because I honestly think that the Lakers and Clippers are going to try to finish their series as soon as possible so they have as much rest and as much preparation time they have for each other in the conference finals. But I'm going to say 6. I'm going to give 2 to Houston only because of their defensive intensity. And although the Lakers had an offensive resurgence, we've seen their offensive inconsistencies. And the Rockets bring that defensive intensity. I can see them making LeBron or AD frustrated. But at the end of the day, the Lakers are too much for this Houston team. Houston barely beat OKC team that was a huge dark horse underdog throughout this whole season. They weren't even expected to be this good. I'm going to go with the Lakers.
Yep, I'll go Lakers in 5 since you guys were both leaning towards it. I'll actually go for it because I do think, like you mentioned, for the Nuggets, the Houston Rockets are also going to be drained from this series, and I don't think the Houston Rockets thought that this series would go to 7 games and go to the final few seconds of the 7th game. But that's a real thing that like they're going to be fatigued from playing high minutes in a competitive game. The Lakers have had rest as well, and I think LeBron and AD are going to put it away, like you guys said. So I got Lakers in 5.